Welcome to Yeshiva Daf, Shir sponsor Nishmas, I'm Yaakov Sholem, and Leah Basitzchok. We're holding in Metzia Daf Nei. We are in Chol HaMoyed Pesach. These are the recordings of the first day of Yom Tov. So where we ended in Erev Yom Tov is in Daf Dal Amud Beis. We are in the word Gufo Omar B'Shua Ben Levi, which is about a third or a quarter of the page from the bottom. So more quoting of B'Shua Ben Levi. Gufo Omar B'Shua Ben Levi. Aleg de Shrish Mishon Moisif Choimish. Aleg de Sheni Ein Moisif Choimish. You add a fifth, which we learned it's a quarter from the existing, a fifth milibar. You add 25% only on the first hekdesh. On the second hekdesh, you do not add it. What is the second hekdesh? Once you did one hekdesh and then you exchange the first hekdesh for the second hekdesh, so the second one you don't add choimish if you redeem that. Says the Gemara, Omarova, my time of the B'Shua Ben Levi. What's the reasoning of B'Shua Ben Levi? Says the Gemara, Omakol v'im hamagdish yigal es beisoy. It says that someone who's magdish will redeem, so then he has to add the fine. Hamagdish la matbis, after the first hekdesh, not the matis. Matis means lashon tfiso. So when you transfer hekdesh from A to B, so magdish is the original one, matvis is the secondary one. So the Gemara, now the Gemara is going to bring a brisa. And the Gemara is going to go and speak about this brisa. The brisa originally will seem that's not so explained. And the Gemara is going to show that this brisa is referring to this B'Shua Ben Levi. We have a brisa that was said in front of B'Shua Ben Levi, instead of Ablozo. It says in the pasuk that if the animal is tameh, so then you redeem it. So more darshans. Ma beim atmeo miyuchedet shetchiloso hegdish v'kula l'shamayim u'marlim bo. You're learning from here that redemption needs the details that we have in this pasuk. What are the details we have in this pasuk? A, it's tchiloso hegdish. What do you mean tchiloso hegdish? So we'll see in a moment. The Gemara is going to explain a little bit more later. Be'ema tmeo, it doesn't end as hegdish. Because be'ema tmeo, you can't bring it to the mizbech. So what will you do with a be'ema tmeo? What you do with a be'ema tmeo is you will sell it, and with the money, you will buy a regular animal. It will never end as a hegdish. It's only beginning hegdish. That's what it means tchiloso hegdish. The kula shamayim, meaning, what does it mean kula shamayim? That means that this thing, it is nothing that goes to, the behemoth tmei is not a carbon. By a carbon, you have animals that some of them belong to the owner. But whatever's by the kabayis belongs 100% to hegdish. And the behemoth tmei belongs to hegdish. And there's a meal. The more now understands, in the original understanding, mo'elimbo means regular meal. What's meal? If a person goes and misuses it, he needs to bring a korban meal. He needs to have these conditions. It needs to be beginning of hegdish, and it needs to be something that completely belongs to hegdish. I understand kula shemayim completely belongs to shemayim. Kachu kalim belongs to the owner, as we'll see a little bit later in the Gemara, but we learned it in previous Masechtas. Kachu kalim, at least according to one man, the Omar, that belongs to the owner. Because the owner is involved in it, it's not fully belong to shemayim. Leis bu mehil, there's no mehil. You want to tell me only beginning of hegdish has mehila? Could that be true? Maybe talking about not regarding mehila, but regarding choimish, and that is the idea. Oh, like who? Like we just said, who could have B'Shua Ben Levi? Like B'Shua Ben Levi said, only the original hegdish has the extra fine of 25%, but the secondary hegdish, if it was already hegdish and it was exchanged for another one, for another animal, the second animal will not have the choimish. Says, you're right. That's exactly what I said. So the Gemara, and the Gemara continues on. So we stopped before the beginning of this Gemara, because the Gemara here continues to discuss this brisa. Behemoth tmei is only in the beginning of hegdish, and not what? Says the Gemara in Daf Nun with Aleph, Behemtza hegdish, like not in the middle of hegdish. What do you mean middle of hegdish? We just learned. What are we learning? What's tchilas hegdish? It's going to exclude a secondary hegdish. Once if you have one hegdish, you exchange it for another animal. That second animal is not included in the pasuk. You don't pay choimish for that. That's 100% true. But there is something called emtza hegdish. There's beginning hegdish, there's the end of hegdish, and there's something in between. I want want to just come and tell you that what we just learned. We learned that if I have a behema hekdesh and I exchange it for another animal, that second animal you don't pay chomish. Why? That second animal is not going to be the animal going to the mizbeach. It still can be a behema tveil. You're learning from behema tveil. So how do I know to exclude that second animal? You exclude the animal that goes to his bath, the last animal, but the second animal I did not exclude. That's what the Gemara is asking. You don't have a second animal, Be'emetz Hekdesh, can be a Be'emetz Hekdesh. It could be Be'emetz Hekdesh and Be'emetz Hekdesh. So we don't find you don't do chomish on the second animal. You just find you don't do chomish on the last animal. But anything in between, you do chomish, not only the first. So that's the was asking. Be'emetz Hekdesh leiso. Only the fish ain't no b'soif Hekdesh. No, but it won't be in the end of Hekdesh. Meaning it won't be the last animal going to the Mizbech. Yeah, but again, Be'emetz Hekdesh, you do have it. So you should have chomish on the middle one. We'll just re-explain the question. We learn from soif hekdesh. Ma soif hekdesh and receive chomish. You don't do chomish on the end. Of Be'emetz Hekdesh and receive chomish. Also in the middle you don't do. Why are you comparing to the end of Hekdesh? Why don't you compare it to the beginning of Hekdesh? You want to compare it to the end of Hekdesh. The reason I'm comparing to the end of Hekdesh is I want to say the same way the last animal is not the original animal that was Hekdesh. It was a nitfas. Nitfas means the Kedusha went from one animal to another. So the middle is exactly similar to that animal. So really more saying, you're right, you could have multiple animals from the beginning to the end. But what we're talking about is the beginning and anything which is different than the beginning, which is the end, the middle, anything which is a nitfas. So let's compare the middle to the beginning. So if you want to compare it, we could say something else. Anything that's not the last and final stage of Hekdesh, you should pay chomish. The first, the second, the third, if it's not the last one. Anything that has after it's a kedusha. How do you know to exclude the middle? It says, well, you're right. Some should want to say Ella, because it really was changing a little bit the understanding. When it says in the pasuk oila said Rav, we talk about the first oila. Taisus here explains three explanations which first oila. What is oila referring to? Carbon atomim. You want to say that the first carbon of the day should be carbon atomim. How do you know? Because it says ha-oila with a hey. The first the oila. What is the oila? Carbon atomim. Why the first oila is why the oila is tamid? Because that's the first oila. In what way tamid is the first oila? So Taisus here brings three explanations. Either because that's the first carbon that Am Yisrael brought in the Midbar, according to one man Omar, they brought in Har Sinai, or that's the first carbon that we have that's mentioned in the psukim of the karbonis, or it's the first one that you do when you start the mizbeach. So different explanations. How do I know the oilo? The first one is tamid, but ha-oilo means the first. So that's what we learn by us as well. Achinami, what's the pasuk? Because it says bebehemo hatmeo tmeo rishayno, the first one, not the second, not the third, the first one. Something more Taika said that Shubalev more brings a price of Shubalevi. What's Brave Shubalevi? The same Shubalevi that says that only the first Hekdesh you pay fifth, but not the second. The Paro Zu Takas Parashal like this. You take an animal, you say this will be in exchange for the animal of Hekdesh. Tal Zu Takas Tash like this, or this clothing in lieu of the Tas of Hekdesh. Padui, it works. V'yad Hekdesh Shalayloin. What does Miyad Hekdesh Shalayloin? Meaning you have to pay the difference. So if the Hekdesh is worth 500. He exchanges the Hekdesh for an animal that's worth 400. It works. But he has to add another 100. He says, this cow is it will be redeemed for 5 sloim for this. I mean, this cow, which is worth 5 sloim, will exchange the Hekdesh. So he's giving it a specific value. So that is, Hekdesh Podoi, again, it's redeemed. Hekdesh does work. And then what? According to Taisus, that's it. Because he's basically saying why we have a clown. That Hekdesh Shavimeyo, you can be paid there in Pruto. I can take a Hekdesh that's worth a lot and redeem it for something very small. That's the clown. You're going to see more about it later. But so here, if he says, I want to exchange animal A to animal B, I'm assuming he wants to give the right value. But if he says animal A, that animal A, which is worth 500 for animal B, and animal A is not worth 500, You're saying he's doing this. He's giving the value of 500 without. He doesn't want to give any more money. Rashi says, if you look at Rashi says, V'hu yashlim. He needs to fill it up. So the Rishonim argue, what does Rashi mean? Does Rashi come to say that even here he has to pay the full amount? Or V'hu yashlim means if he said it's worth 5 sloim, it's really worth only 4, he has to give the difference. He doesn't have to give the value of the animal of Hekdesh. So let's say the animal of Hekdesh is worth 500. This animal is worth 400. And he said that this, and he said 450. So he has to pay the extra 50, but not more. That's some Rishonim will learn in Rashi. Says that, but now we're finishing the brayso. Like the Shvi Moisif Chaim, you should pay an extra 25% on the first Hekdesh. I like the Sheni Ein Moisif Chaim. You don't add Chaimish on the second Hekdesh. So this is exactly B'Shul Ben Levi, that in the second Hekdesh you don't add a Chaimish. So look the Mishnah. Haino Arbo Kesef. The example I know is 4 kesef. That we learned earlier. For a sela, it's 4 kesef. That goes at the bishtus, right? Because that came out one out of 4. It's a sixth of the entire sela, and that's the example the Mishnah brings over here. The Rishonim ask, it's not arba kesef happens to me. That's the example the Mishnah said, but you can say other examples. But why is the Mishnah taking this example specifically? Harba I know arba kesef. Hataino shtei kesef. So when you have a taina, the taina is shtei kesef. So the taina is shtei kesef, meaning when Reuven comes and claims money on Shimon, so then Reuven has to claim at least shtei kesef, 2 silver coins. The haida shepruto, and Shimon, who wants to be moedeh, shepruto. This is really a quote from a Mishnah in which was the most important point. It's a Mishnah Masechet Shavuos. What's a Mishnah Masechet Shavuos? In order for Reuven to, when you have Reuven and Shimon, you have a Toyin Nita. Reuven says, you owe me money. And Shimon says, no, I owe you only partial. Right? That's the Moedeh Mixas, classic Moedeh Mixas. Reuven needs to claim 2 silver coins. Shimon needs to be Moedeh in a pruto. That's what it is. Machlekes de Rav and Shmuel, how to understand exactly the Mishnah. Rashi here learns it. They say 1 pruto out of the 2 silver coins. Because here's the Mishnah that says Chamesh Prutos. There's 5 prutos, 5 times the places that we're required to have a pruto. Ha'idasha pruto we just mentioned. The admission is 1 pruto. Va'ishim is kadesh b'shvei pruto. What is kiddushi? Pruto. Haneno b'shvei pruto min hegdish mal. Right, someone who enjoys or benefits from a hegdish 1 pruto, there's meila. Ha'moitz shvei pruto chayav la'achis. You find shvei pruto in the street, you have to announce it. That's an avedo. Ha'goizas chaver shvei pruto. Someone who steals from his friend shvei pruto. He did a shvuah, so you need to pay for it, and you have to have the extra, the payments that we learned earlier in this Masechta, and then the Masechta Bava. Madai has to go even to Madai, Ayin Sham, and we learned in Masechta Bava. We brought the reason why it says Dafka Madai, but the Vilna Goyen says that Madai money was not worth a lot. So even in Madai, when money is not worth a lot, you have to go and bring back the money. The Mishnah brings 5 examples of prutos. We'll see in the Gemara. The Gemara is going to bring other examples. And this is a source through many of the discussions in the Rishonim. Why don't we bring other examples? And do we have the Arias? Anything else does not have to be specifically a pruto, or it has to be more than a pruto. So, because if we bring only 5 examples of a pruto, for all the other cases, it's not a pruto. So that brings up a lot of different discussions. I'm not going to go into it right now, but just to keep in mind, this is the Mishnah, the source of what is a pruto. We already learned. I know Arba Kesef, this is the example we had in the previous Mishnah. What is I know? 4 out of 24, which means a 6. Shtus Lamekach. So why do you have to tell me this in our Mishnah? It says the Gemara, I wanted to tell you the idea that the claim is to be 2 kesef, 2 silver coins, and the admission is 1 pruto. Hanamitani, we learn that as well. We learn that as well. Something was saying for Yitzchak, you need for the end. We want to give you the 5 prutos, tell you the list of 5 prutos. That's why we're mentioning all this to get to that. It says, and the way it comes out, when we speak about Oino, so we don't mention pruto, and we'll see in the Gemara we don't mention pruto. So we don't mention pruto. We're saying only by Moedim Mikta pruto, and by the way, here are the 5 prutos. It says more Chamesh prutos in. There's 5 prutos. Why don't we mention Oino pruto? There's no Oino pruto. What does it mean there's no Oino pruto? We should have many explanations. Rashi's explanation is, what does it mean Oino pruto? meaning that you don't have it's not Rashi here, it's Rashi later, but they don't have no pruto. Let's see Rashi here. You know the prutos bepochos meisa shu the be'ashel kesef. Meaning, you need to have at least an iser. Iser is the coin that we mentioned before. You need to have a bigger coin. Now the shayla we shouldn't discuss doesn't mean specifically an iser just because that's the minimum amount for a no, or it means it needs to be more than a pruto. It could be pruto and a half. It can be more. It has to be more than a pruto. But on a pruto itself, you don't have. If someone was cheated with a pruto, then you don't have a no. Levi says there is a no for a pruto. That's in Levi in his brayso did mention a different list of prutos. Chamesh prutos, and here the 5 prutos according to Levi. How you know a pruto? As he mentioned, because he holds the no as a pruto. The Aidah pruto, and admission is a pruto, as we mentioned in our Mishnah. The Kiddush Yeshir pruto, Kiddush is a pruto, as we mentioned in our Mishnah. The Gezel a pruto, and also stealing has to be a pruto. The Yeshivas are Dayonim be pruto. The Dayonim sit to judge only when there's a pruto, now when it's less, as the Gemara is going to explain in a moment. So, why did our Mishnah did not mention Yeshivas Dayonim when the Dayonim start judging? So, we spoke about Gezel, so we see Gezel as a pruto. So we see that the Dayonim judge only a pruto. Did we mention Gezel and Aveda? How nechitzach that we do? We want to mention Gezel and Aveda. Gezel agrees with Chaver Shapruto. I want to tell you this idea. He has to go pay it back, even going to Madai. What's the Aveda? Even though now it's worth less than a pruto. If he found it by a pruto, he has to give it. So that's what we mentioned. We'll just finish the cheshbon and then go back to this idea that the gezel is a pruto. So Levi my time why does Levi has 5 examples? One of them is not aveda. So more pruto. My time Tanya aveda pruto. Tani gezel. We said stealing. So we know that aveda is like stealing. You can't take from your friend a pruto. Gezel k'tani shirasadayonim. Didn't you say Gezel and the Yeshiva Sadayanim that the judges don't judge us in a pruto? Yeshiva Sadayanim itzechlei. No, you do have to say Yeshiva Sadayanim. La'afuki b'dav kedino. To come to exclude of tino. Don't worry about tino. Bezdin miskokim afilu pochos re'pruto. Tina said the Bezdin do judge even less than a pruto. So I want to tell you not like a kedino. That's off to mention this example. For Levi, again, Levi had 5 examples. One of them was the second one was Hekdesh, and 3 examples from the Mishnah. He made 2 examples from our Mishnah. One is Aveda. He says Aveda is included. And now the other example he made is Hekdesh. The what? Didn't say that you have a din of Nenesh Shaprutum in Hekdesh. Someone who enjoyed the Hekdesh Shaprutum. For later my time looked on Hekdesh. How do you mention Hekdesh? Bechulin kamayim, bekotshim lo kamayim. I'm not talking about Hekdesh, I'm talking about Chulin. So let's look at our Tana. The Kamaya Bekotchin, Midni Meiser Pruto. Our Tana doesn't mention Kotchin. Why are they saying only a Kotchin? Why you don't mention Meiser? Meiser is also Pruto. Tell you why. He holds that it's not that the Meiser has to be Pruto. It needs to be the Chaimish Pruto. The Meiser has to be 4 Prutos. If you leave the Chaimish Meiser Prutos, mention Chaimish. So Bekainu Kamaya Bechaimish lo Kamaya. I want to speak about the principle, not about the fine, not about the Chaimish. Gulfo, just to end this point. Tino Bezin is cooking for the Pochos Pruto. Bezin will judge even less than a Pruto. Macy Rova Vesta Shech Choto Min Hegdish Shalom. Someone who did a chait Min Hegdish has to pay. Says the more that the name with base. Le Rabbi's Pochos Pruto Le Show when you have to pay less than a Pruto. Le Hegdish. We talk about Hegdish. Hegdish you have to pay even less than a Pruto. Hegdish Shina Le Hegdish Loy. By Hegdish there's no Pruto. You don't. If it's less than a Pruto, you don't have to pay. So why will Bezin judge less than a Pruto? If Bezin started a judgment with a pruto, then they ended even Pochos Pruto. You start with the pruto, you don't have to end with the pruto. What does it mean to end? Rashi says, Rashi says that if Reuven claimed against Shimon, you owe me a pruto. Came Shimon and said, 1 second, Reuven, you owe me less than a pruto. Then we do judge it. So maybe we shouldn't learn Spedavko. And that's a discussion on Locho. Because Reuven tells Shimon, you owe me a whole pruto. Says Shimon, no, I owe you less. There's a portion, a certain portion. It's less than a pruta. You owe me. What happens if Reuben sells us another claim? Maybe not. Some Rishonim learn that if Reuben started a judgment in pruta, he could say, by the way, I have another judgment. I came for this, but I have another thing. It's not a lot. It's less than a pruta, but I want to add it to the din. So, and some say that both are equally included in this Gemara. Now, just to mention, very, very important over here, we're learning that there's no gezel less than a pruto, and Beizin don't niskag less than a pruto. The big machlokes in the Rishonim to understand it, really based on the Gemara in Sanhedrin. What's the idea that there's no gezel less than a pruto? Some learn that's also Pashtas, Rosh Rashi, the Chinuch, it's a din of mechila. Yidin or moichel less than a pruto. The moichel. Other Rishonim learn, the pshat is, because it's Gzeres HaKosov, it's a halacha mishvisina, some want to say, that in order to have judgment, you have to have a pruto. Less than a pruto, there's no judgment. There's nafkamina. Nafkamina is what happens if a person steals from his friend half a pruto, then another half a pruto, another half a pruto. So if you say it's a mechila, it's not mechil 3 times less than a pruto. If you're saying it's Gzeres HaKosov, you can't judge less than a pruto, so it doesn't matter if it happened a few times, it's less than a pruto. In both cases, it says, Lamaise, it's still asur. Why is it asur? So if you hold mechila, the pshat is, because mechila is asur, because even though you have a mechila on less than a pruto, but less than a pruto is still causing tsar. That's a Rashi learned in Sanhedrin. Because it's caused tsar to the Yid, so therefore you can't do less than a pruto. If you learn that the shear of the Torah is a pruto, so the Rechonim learn less than a pruto is chatzi shir. Chatzi shir also min Torah, and this opens a whole new discussion, a whole new sugya, which we're not going to get to right now. So the Mishnah. Chamisha chumshim, there's 5 chumshim, 5 fifths. What are the 5 fifths? Eluhem, ha'oichel trumo, the trumas meiser. Ha'oichel trumo, somebody eats truma has to pay a fifth, a fine. Trumas meiser, someone eats trumas meiser. What's trumas meiser? Trumas meiser is when the Levi gets his meiser, he has to give 10% to the claim. The trumas meiser shalmai, similarly, trumas meiser shalmai. What's trumas meiser shalmai? When demai is when is an amaretz, and amaretz we choished him that he didn't do meiser. So you have to do meiser misafek lechumra. You have to do also trumas meiser lechumra. Ve'achala ve'abikurim and chala and bikurim. Chala is and bikurim are compared to truma. Rashi brings the psukim, and all of these things are considered to be truma. Trumas meiser, trumas meiser shaldmai. Chala and bikurim all included in truma. Chala is what you mafish from the east. So bikurim is the first fruit on the tree, and all of them you have a chaymish. That's one example of a chaymish, the truma chaymish. Moisiv chaymish. That's number 1. Number 2, Rashi points out the netter revayu ma'aseh sheni also learn from each other, and a person who redeems the 4th year fruit, or he redeems his ma'aseh sheni, has to have a chaymish. They learn to each other. That's the second example. You redeem hegdish, you have to have a chaymish. It's something else. Someone who enjoys hegdish has to pay hegdish plus a fine of 25%. Now talk about redeeming it. The person who's doing something wrong is using is doing me'ilah on hegdish. Someone who steals from his friend and does a shua, then he has to have 25% as a fine as well. So Trumas Meiser Shalmai. Demai is only derabbanan. And Rabbanan were machmir by Trumas Meiser of Demai to also add 25% like you do in a regular Trumas Meiser. The Chacham went azoi vait. Yes, this goes like Rameir that holds that we do equate Rabbanan to the Reisa in terms of a chizuk. Titania, what's the raya? Person brings a get to the Yisayam. He didn't say Faret Faretem. We know in Mesachas Gittin we learned when someone brings a get to the Yisayam, he needs to say Faret Faretem. If he did not say it, Yoitzi al Mamzer Divrei Rameir holds a Vlad Mamzer. He's machmir on it like it's a Tishel Torah. Choyim ain't a Vlad Mamzer. Kitzad Yasad, he fix it up. Rashi Tais explains, according to a mayor, if before she gets married. According to Rabbanan, if he gets married, you want to fix it. You plan you may take it from her, Yachzor it then gives it to her, B'Shnei Shtayim, 4 of 2. V'yermal Fonet Fonet, this is Fonet Fonet, and Tais brings a right from here, Fonet Fonet to say B'Shas Hanesino, or immediately after, and that's what we talk about here. What's the just to remind yourselves, what's the Fonet Fonet? Someone who brings with the Yisayam a get, he needs to testify that he saw the writing of the get, he saw the signature of the get, to come and say that I know it was done correctly. So more the Rameir should do loyal for him to connect the Yoitzel Mamzer. Could you Rameir because he didn't say for him to connect them? You have to divorce the wife, and the son is considered to be a Mamzer. In your mail, the timing. Toma Ununu Ishve de Hulo. Ununu say the name of Hulo. Whenever a person changes from what or the son is a mamzer. So you see from here, Rameir is comparing to Rabbanan to Doraisa. One thing you will see in the Sugya going back and forth is that the Mechlokes Rashi Toyes, I don't understand what the Gemara is being a raya for Rameir. Toyes really focuses on the Hemshech Sugya, so we're going to see in the next half. But what the question is, what do you see from Rameir? Is the fact that Rameir is machmir and Derabanan like Doraisa? Like we see here, Fonetim is the Rabbanan. And Rameir is machmir that the son is a mamzer like the Raisa. Or the Rameir is machmir more than Rabbanan. Rabbanan said it's okay. Rameir is more machmir. When it being a right, the Rameir is more machmir than the Rabbanan. Okay. Well, we conclude this daf. Continue immediately with the next daf, the daf of the second day of Yom Tov.